I mean, just look at that. Is it getting difficult for anyone else to stop looking out the window? This time of year comes around, the sun comes out over the dreary little island that I call home, and it becomes sort of irresistible. It far too quickly becomes a part of all the things that you want to be doing. When those new titles feel like they're not clicking with you like they probably should be, when that pile of unplayed games doesn't seem to beckon quite like they normally do, you look out the window and you realize what you want to feel more of. For me, during this transitional time of year, if I'm not choosing to sit under that glow, then just its presence will convince me what to spend my time with. Not just with the experiences that might bring me nostalgia, but the ones that urge a reflection. The ones that I come back to take stock of where my life is. I look out that window, and I want more of what it has helped me to know. The twilight of a console that has meant more for me in my young adult and now adult life than I can maybe express is finally upon us. So I really do have no choice but to state my fondness, give a parting salute to one of the most important times that it gifted us. I have so many choices, but there's only one that truly feels right to talk about. Animal Crossing. It feels so right to finally be saying it. I knew I was always someday going to make this video. I guess it just finally took the right weather and the passing of a genuine titan, a mainstay, to find the right time to get here. Animal Crossing, to be honest, was not a series that I was on board with from the beginning, but it was definitely a long overdue discovery. For so long it went unnoticed by me. I doubted what I just labelled as weird. It really took until gaps appeared in everything else that I was playing to consider what else I could discover. Cultivating a virtual life for myself was something that I could only fractionally achieve in experiences like Shenmue when I would stop to smell the flowers, or even when me and my sister would purposely drive off track in Mario Kart and just see what we could explore. I'd go as far as to force it in some cases. I often played Pokemon just to reside where I felt comfortable. They were all my frustrated attempts to feel some relatedness to the space, building these brief but impossible to forget experiences that I could rarely convince myself had much meaning when they were usually just for me. Communicating what makes these games special has never really been easy, but I came to discover that it was nothing less than finding a virtual community that made you feel like you belong in a space. Where today I have to commit to something like a ranked shooter, partaking in hours with my friends to feel like I've even come close to leaving a slightly unique mark on the world, Animal Crossing was tailor-made to offer nothing but that sensation. The niches and eccentricities of just what you choose to do would still matter long after you were the only one left or had even stopped playing. It was a weird choice to make that be what the game is, but it remains affirmative permission and a sincere welcome to just make your way of life part of the game itself. My eventual arrival to Animal Crossing on the Wii and subsequent obsession with it on the 3DS and Switch, well, it felt like coming home in more ways than one. The final form of something that I'd always needed, finally in my hands. As one of the definitive takes of the life simulation genre, right up there with The Sims and Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing deviates from a human perspective. Nintendo must have seen these spaces and worlds conquered by humans so unanimously and chose to respond with a natural world that's been pushed into replicating them. You're dropped amongst this colourful cast of anthropomorphic animal characters, and you're the new villager let loose on the land to make it your own. There's no explicitly expressed narrative or impending goals. Once Tom Nook has given you a place to stay and politely asked that you eventually pay him back for it, the rest becomes up to you. Go ahead and make you and your friends a home that you can all enjoy, but make it how you'd like. Across your own time, you progress from taming the wilderness itself to slowly finessing the specific details of your little community. Success and some feeling of finality only really being felt, if it ever even actually does, when you've built a home with the exact villages and decorations that you want to share it with. Having to frequently share the spotlight with the heavy hitter franchises of the company, and as a game that was from the beginning quite puzzling to communicate the appeal of, Animal Crossing really should have just been doomed. It should have sat alongside some of its fellow brother and sister series in the big Nintendo catalog as just another one that not everyone picked up. It could very well have ended up like Pikmin or Earthbound, only really given attention if it showed up in a crossover like Smash Bros. Some brief sales coming from some brief exposure, followed by then years of silence and all of us waiting and hoping that Nintendo might take a chance on it again. However, thankfully that just wasn't the case. Despite the typical track record, we got the opposite. Something translated. None of the games in the series are necessarily the best Nintendo games ever made, but for a time, and perhaps even still, they are some of the most Nintendo games to ever exist. If ever there was a series to spell out what these creatives represented, then you can look at Pikmin, look at Zelda, or Wii Sports even, but Animal Crossing should be in that conversation. Few others can really represent Nintendo's own, off in the corner, doing their own thing persona, like the sheer personality of Animal Crossing does. That all starts with the villagers. They take on this Pokemon-like quality in that we can name them because we remember them, and we care to do so. Interactions with most of them are nothing short of straight dopamine. Stuck with offensively bright colouring, they were born and bred to attract your attention. Your favourites stick out in the crowd for a reason, desperate for you to get to know them and what they have to say, or because they happen to reside in your world and refuse to do anything but just shine. Just like Pokemon 2, there really isn't a single bad villager design, just lesser offerings. The natural conclusion of these character designs still feeling like a distant prospect, when I still believe that no animal couldn't be incorporated into this design ethos and manage to fit. They are impossible to not fall for, simply sometimes because they were frankly hesitant to even consider doing the same with you. They weren't necessarily mean, but they were certainly daring. Aesthetics aside, they were completely unashamed of what they had to say and think, which was a bold choice to not just give away everything that you wanted immediately. Often they were never entirely what we immediately pegged them as. They can gaslight you, make the conversation be just about their problems, or comment on just life itself. We've all been so happy to see so many of them get the chance to return that they did, because come on, who doesn't miss someone that you took the time to arrive at good terms with? The best of them genuinely took time to warm up to you, and that truly remains the standard for me. Anything less, and they just wouldn't have been the very different and honestly well-rounded friends and cohorts that I couldn't picture my version of these places without. I feel like every one of them should be considered as this earnest reminder, proof to me in particular that I can love the design and aesthetics of stuff like Kirby, Hilda, Sonic, Ranma, Undertale, and especially Animal Crossing, if I choose to. I have the permission to continue to enjoy as an adult what would have made a younger me feel wonder. I should be open to a levity and a joy that I will forever need to exist alongside what I choose to let become a part of myself. Maybe it was just the kind of game that I needed to be exposed to when a different breed entirely was, for the most part, all that most of us were sometimes privy to be familiar with. Those very clean lines that you see all over the work of Nintendo, composed to perfectly prompt work and effort. These games state proudly, customize to the very last tile that you can. A degree of available creative options, the likes of which we exclusively see in the indie scene these days, has been pushed front and center from the very start to the latest outing. The enticing hook of this game being to, well, move out, get a job, decorate your home, which somehow manages to work when traveling to distant worlds or facing new opponents are also still on the same table. I chop, I mine, I retrieve, I barter, I sell, and I collect a craft. In short, I commit. You learn to embrace the systems that keep this place turning, because in the end, why would you want to limit what you get to help this place become, and all that you will inevitably get to see? When burned out, alienated from my work, or reluctant to engage with the people around me, this genre is always here to help alleviate those anxieties. These are my games to help forget they exist, and find positives in them once more. I can come to find there might still just be joy in accomplishment, not just momentary relief. The grind is the grind, it always will be, but the finished product can't help but exude the pride that we should feel in the time taken. Now I do recognise some hypocrisy there, in that I don't typically enjoy repetition. I'm actually criticised by a lot of people I know for putting down the likes of Spider-Man for just how little I felt like it was changing after just the first few hours. So I understand when people ask, how can I be the same person who is then willing to sit for hours at a time knowing exactly what I'll get? Well, I think I can see value in investing in what might just be intentional tedium. It isn't exactly an interesting trait of mine, but I am a self-confessed lover of moving. I'm first a volunteer for helping on a move, to redesign a shelf at home or in my day job. I simply relish in adding a dash of myself to the places that I get to reside in, to some small semblance of not control, but calm. To tell the truth, I feel that here, that wholesome feeling being reflected by the immaculate vibes of the soundtrack. Working here or there, I come to look at what I achieve as not a long-awaited escape or the end of endurance, but lasting progress, prompted by focus on the little things. Sit and listen to that breeze, or those lasting tracks, and watch them set the tone of how to appreciate the comforts of the things you do in your small familiar spaces. Monday mornings come around and I arrive early to my place of work, and with these little hits on in the background, I like to sort out the deliveries before my colleagues arrive. It's a ritual of sorts, not too far removed from the very things that I'd be doing on my island. Completing what I can, not because it's what I'm stuck doing with no end in sight, but I guess to be a small contributor to the good that might come from that day. It really wasn't the job of these games to try and educate us on the impending pressures of the coming adult world, but living in a time where I regularly fear the fact that I might never own my own home someday, and that my reality is too often on fire, I can effortlessly return to that vision, to the idea that some good may come from the time that I gave, and to knowing that a place feels lived in because of something only I did, a trace of character, maybe even worth, that I can too easily convince myself I lack. I had and continue to feel fulfillment there, visible instances of progress, and unadulterated freedom to go at my own pace. It was a sense that, at least in my earlier years, I didn't think I would ever truly know outside of the virtual world. At least until, well, I quite literally left home. Few other games would find the means to continue to follow me quite like these ones have. For so many of us, Animal Crossing shows back up like this long-awaited vacation, exclusive to only those of us in the know. I can only remember having to once explain to my philosophy teacher, who had just overheard a group of us talking about Pocket Camp, that this wasn't some book we were all reading, and it was definitely in her best interest to move us all on as quickly as she could. Our willingness to dive back into that commitment with each new release proved that there was no real consistent competitor. That undeniable approachability taking what had initially been the outlier to become now the blueprint itself. What would follow would shine brightly, but almost certainly do it in Animal Crossing's wake. That starting point paying off massively for the surrounding market. The cozy umbrella of different games didn't start with Animal Crossing becoming a Game of the Year contender, but to be honest, the subgenre was made far more legitimate, and it did become far less daunting in the eyes of many directly because of it. Cult of the Lamb, A Short Hike, or Lost and Found Company, they would all exist without Animal Crossing. But they most definitely benefit from being lucky enough to follow something that told us there was room for this brand of aesthetics to exist, and that more importantly, it was okay for us to take things at our own pace. This much needed corner of the industry doesn't owe everything to when Animal Crossing took over the world in 2020, but you still can't deny how much of a door it opened by proxy for so many others, how many eyes it drew to this particular kind of party, introducing the world to experiences that became companions, not just deadlines, at a time when we really needed them most. It isn't fair to the game, but there is simply no more timely game release ever. The release of New Horizons coinciding with so much of lockdown across the world amongst a constant barrage of almost endless halting to life. Well, it was timely to an almost worrying degree. Outside of those of us who had spent time craving just a new legitimate game in the series, the majority begged for this thing to come to shelves early because I guess who knew what else we were even going to get afterwards? What good things could we really believe would be on the horizon? Getting a hold of New Horizons was important. It was this high priority purchase for so much of my generation. Some fraction of that time for so many of us simply didn't look the same if you weren't playing this game, or at the very least you were plugged into the world around it. It isn't perfect, I admit. In retrospect, it is the most lacking in the personality department across the whole series. A big part of that being that you did actually used to take a lot of shit from some of these guys. New Horizons now being content to interrupt and challenge you less than the series ever had before. I mean, come on, no one gaslights you about different coloured furniture anymore. And that says a lot. For some, that unique and classic charm that was to many players just a given was starting to fade. Somewhat. Those criticisms of an eventual lacking feeling being, to me at least, less so the fault of the game itself, but just the circumstances of life, leaving fans to, I think, indirectly engage far more than must have been originally anticipated. It's a debate for me though that's secondary to what I still feel I can find here. They are criticisms that Nintendo cannot afford to not address, that I do acknowledge myself, but that I still choose to just live with, to put to one side. I too think that the game could have capitalized on having the villagers take, I don't know, the odd chance to say something a little out of the blue, and definitely be a little bit less bland. But given the sheer state of where most of us were, I won't deny the inherent value in always being able to come back to someone who's always going to have nice things to say to you, who at the very least will always be consistent, if nothing else. To be honest, I find it difficult to accept that this game is in fact 5 years old now. In truth, I've never really divorced myself from the strange reality that I shared with it, that so many of us did. Life to me hasn't fully returned to what I feel it honestly should resemble. And I do have to remind myself that I'm not still back emulating normality. I've never wanted to turn back the clock. I value the minutes that I have left rather than pretend that they aren't meant for me. And some of that started because I and so many others had something to help us at least pretend that we were forging new paths. To distract, to encourage, when it felt like all we did was retrace old steps. To play was to feel traces of the step outside that we were all collectively craving. We willed it to convince us that we had never stopped visiting the real thing. In a game that has to be somewhat aware of the power it possesses, that could honestly promote whatever messaging Nintendo wants, I love that it chooses to remind us that goals are arbitrary. What we chose to do with our islands had no greater critic than just ourselves. No deadline or recognition comes before what you eventually decide what you want to do. And that isn't just true of your time in the game. It's liberating to feel that you can play as you please, without feeling like you're taking the intended experience, like you're taking life for granted. Just by playing, you weren't doing the bare minimum when there was already very little to do. You were maintaining a freedom from the pressure of expectation, an encouraging feeling to keep with you when real life only gave us the opposite, where uncertainty and a lack of direction were the new normal and they were nothing to feel good about. In the times before, it might have been fun to build one of these islands and show it off in whatever capacity you could, to maybe kind of triumph over someone in some way, just for the sake of it. However, now it became about savouring every inch and second of it. That engagement, that kind of closeness to others who knew what we were feeling and who were coping with it in the exact same ways. I think of time with those islands as old toys, favourite shirts or art projects that you still keep in a cupboard. They don't define those chapters of our lives, but there's no way we can easily discard what they were to us at those times. They don't get to just mean nothing if your mind can slip back to them at the most random of moments. If they can still remind you that life wasn't fantastic, but at least there were still some fireworks. They aren't necessarily the most important things in your world, but to recognise them is to recognise the worth that will never quite fade. A memento of the passion or time that you've never quite walked away from. Proof that the dread of all this being forever did pass, and that what you did there, despite what you might believe, was good. Even if it was just you that saw it, even if it was just for you. The characters, the island, the game, still saying like it's the first time you've ever heard it, that bad times are just times that are bad. You get some self-awareness after enough time of Animal Crossing. Then or now. To have lived with it or to try and make art around it as I'm trying to do, is to contend with doubt, to question the worth or even the appropriateness, I guess, of continuing to look at these games for calm. That some people might think less of me for taking as seriously as I do. Am I substituting worthwhile progress for still sitting with art like this? Maybe. I don't know. But a game built to be so unconcerned like this one is what's necessary to recognise the anxieties that I am alone bringing to the conversation. Animal Crossing is blunt, unashamedly self-aware. It isn't hiding anything. The onus is just on me to not blast out noise and try and set the terms of my impending future. I just have to be happy with the beat that I'm currently going along with. I have to remember that they all just want to help me say to myself, I'm okay if I'm just doing what I'm doing right now. Hearing that will help you take the time to recognise that the only person who should matter to qualify us as doing well, as being quote-unquote fantastic, should really be ourselves. For some people, a moment like that might be where you leave this experience behind. This definitive mark of proof of everything that I was meant to get from this. While this video is a eulogy for that time, it is not an ending though. I'm not parting with this horizon. I'm just ready to see the good that the next one will no doubt show me, hoping it's just as bright as all that I have and hopefully will come to know. Looking out of that window and looking around at those animals and the places that they call home, I feel the same thing communicated. The constant or eventual presence of either can remind me of what both have said to me. Remind me of just what I'm now capable of saying to myself. Let's get this done. I made it. Today is a good day.